My name is Sophia Grant. I am 38 years old, a woman who once believed that success would finally earn me the respect of my family. I built a company from nothing, sold it for $2 billion, and thought my parents would finally see me. Not as the quiet daughter who always gave and never asked for anything, but as someone they could be proud of. I was wrong, terribly wrong. That night on the yacht is burned into my memory like a scar. The Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction, the water black and restless beneath a sliver of moon. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting my skin, but nothing stung as much as the words my father whispered against my ear. "Say hello to the sharks." I had no time to respond. His hand pressed against my shoulder, and in the same breath my mother's palm shoved hard against my back. My body tilted forward, my heels scraping against the polished deck, as gravity yanked me toward the railing. I gasped, but the only sound that came out was a strangled plea swallowed by the night. And then I was falling. The icy air tore through my lungs as I plunged into the water, the surface hitting me like concrete. The shock of the ocean stole my breath, my arms flailing against the crushing weight that dragged me under. But what seared itself into me more than the water's cold bite was the final image I saw before the waves closed overhead. My brother, Daniel, standing beside them. He didn't move to stop them. He didn't even look away. He just smiled. That smile told me everything. This was not a mistake. This was not a moment of madness. This was planned. Together. And I knew exactly why. $2 billion. My fortune. My life's work. The money they believed should have belonged to the family all along, not to me. The overlooked daughter who had been nothing more than their financial safety net. As I sank into the black water, I understood their plan. Kill me. Declare a tragic accident. Inherit everything through the documents they had so carefully arranged. To the world, it would look like grief. To them, it would feel like triumph. But they never expected what came next. Because I didn't die. I remember clawing my way toward the surface, coughing salt water from my lungs, forcing my body to obey me even as my muscles seized from the cold. I was a swimmer once. That training came back like a ghost, urging me to fight one more second, one more stroke. Above the roar of my heartbeat, I could still hear the yacht's engines fading, carrying my family away, my killers, my blood. And yet, in the silence that followed, a seed of defiance took root inside me. They believed they had erased me from existence. They believed they would come home to my wealth, to my name, to the power they had always craved. But when they returned, thinking the fortune was theirs at last, I was already waiting, and I had prepared something they would never forget. A surprise. You see, betrayal at the hands of strangers can wound you, but betrayal at the hands of your own parents, it redefines who you are. The night they shoved me into the ocean, I became someone new. Not the obedient daughter, not the sister who quietly paid her brother's debts. I became the woman who would stand in the ruins of their lies and build justice from the ashes. I tell you this because you must understand. I wasn't simply pushed off a yacht. I was pushed out of the illusion that blood means loyalty. I was pushed into the truth of who my family really was. And in that moment, gasping in the black water, I swore they would see me again. Not as their victim, but as their reckoning. That is how my story begins. I didn't learn about betrayal on a yacht. I learned it in a damp Portland bungalow that smelled like rain and detergent, where affection arrived in teaspoons and credit always flowed toward my brother. After the ocean, my mind walks backward to that house, because that is where my family's arithmetic was set. Add to Daniel. Subtract from me. My parents wore one sentence like a charm against doubt. A girl doesn't need much. Save it for Daniel. They spoke it when the grocery cash ran thin, when choices pinched, when doors closed. He got private tutors, weekend baseball clinics, and a glossy poster of a red coupe taped above his bed years before he could drive. I got hand-me-down notebooks and a reminder to be grateful. When I asked for a science kit, my mother touched my hair and said we could borrow one from the neighbors. At 15, I started bussing tables at a diner off Burnside, then sweeping floors at a shoe store before closing. I laid paychecks on the kitchen table like offerings. My father folded them into his wallet and called me a good daughter. The mortgage, the light bill, Daniel's travel team fee, money had tasks before it had meaning. I learned to study in the chatter between customers in the thin hour after midnight. Wanting something and deserving it were separate truths. The house taught me the first did not guarantee the second. The numbers favored him, but the ledger ran deeper than cash. When Daniel wrecked a borrowed sedan, my college savings covered the repair. When he wanted a used Mustang, my parents called it motivation. When I asked about replacing my cracked laptop, my mother said the library had computers. A girl doesn't need much, she added, smiling as if she had offered wisdom. I nodded, then found my own fixes, because need and dignity should never be enemies. Indifference is a sound before it is a fact. It was the kettle whistling while my notes buckled under spilled tea, the television chewing through my scholarship rehearsal, the click of the front door when I stayed late to finish an application. The house was loud in ways that didn't bend toward me. The only quiet I owned lived inside my head, where equations and code kept their own counsel, where effort mapped to outcome, and nobody else's appetite could consume my results. Money blurred more lines as I got older. My father opened a credit card for emergencies in my name and promised to handle the bill. I discovered the balance in collections during freshman orientation. My mother asked me not to embarrass the family. During tax season, Daniel was listed as a dependent again, though he slept elsewhere most nights. I filed a loan, bought a bus pass, and learned that autonomy is cheaper than permission. There were bright scenes, and I count them honestly. Oregon strawberries on Sunday pancakes, the metallic sweetness in the air after a storm, my mother humming an old tune while folding towels. They prove I noticed everything, even tenderness, and still chose the truth. I was undercounted. That distinction matters because it explains why I built endurance instead of bitterness and structure instead of noise. Work became my answer to being outnumbered. I found adults who judged by output, not origin story. Mr. Albright let me borrow lab time after school if I scrubbed beakers until my hands pruned. At the public library, Miss Drew slid programming manuals across the desk and told me to keep them as long as I needed. I built small utilities that fixed ordinary nuisances, scripts to clean spreadsheet chaos, a widget that predicted when the bus would actually arrive. Algorithms felt like bridges nobody else could see, spanning over the parts of my life that never balanced. Promotions Daniel didn't earn still landed in his lap, wrapped in our parents' certainty that he would bloom if we gave him more sun. Boundaries I requested were recast as ingratitude. I practiced sounding calm while drawing lines in permanent ink. I stored documents where curiosity would not reach. I learned to leave a paper trail that didn't smudge when someone tried to rewrite it, and I kept copies far from home. If resentment had rooted, I would have grown crooked. Instead, patience stiffened into discipline. I learned to say no without apology. I saved 20% even when it hurt. I studied the law because I needed a language that didn't blink when someone called me selfish for keeping what was mine. My parents' motto shaped me in a way they never intended. A girl who doesn't need much learns to build plenty from little, and she learns to protect it. Years later, when success finally became numbers large enough to bend headlines, the pattern at home did not change. Congratulations arrived with invoices. I kept writing checks, then stopped. Boundaries, once invisible, gained locks. In the hush that followed, the house I came from revealed itself fully. Not a shelter, but a ledger. That is why the words on the yacht were familiar. They were only the loudest version of a sentence I had heard my whole life. College was not a rite of passage for me. It was a battlefield. I enrolled at the Oregon Institute of Technology with a partial scholarship that barely skimmed tuition. The rest I covered with relentless shifts. Morning barista work before lectures, evenings cataloging books in the campus library, and weekends troubleshooting office networks for small businesses that could not afford official IT support. Sleep became optional, but persistence was mandatory. Every dollar earned was a brick laid toward independence, each hour a quiet refusal to repeat the arithmetic of my childhood. I carried ramen in my backpack, not because it was fashionable, but because it was the cheapest way to stretch calories through weeks that blurred together. It was during those restless nights in the computer lab that my life's direction sharpened. A professor introduced me to a project exploring diagnostic algorithms, and I became obsessed. I had watched relatives struggle with late-stage illnesses, treatments arriving too late, options narrowing because no one had spotted the warning signs. What if software could act as an early sentinel, recognizing subtle changes long before the human eye? I buried myself in medical journals, cross-referencing symptom databases, writing crude scripts that stumbled but occasionally flickered with promise. When friends partied, I debugged. When classmates complained about midterms, I was building prototypes on outdated machines, convinced that detection at the right moment could alter destiny. After graduation, I turned down offers from established firms. They promised stability but also anonymity. Instead, I gambled everything on a fledgling startup I named Metaskin AI. I poured in my savings, maxed out modest credit cards, and lived in a cramped studio with peeling paint and a view of the alley dumpsters. My team started with 2 volunteers, both equally reckless, both willing to code through dawn for equity instead of paychecks. Venture capitalists dismissed us with polite smiles. Impressive concept, they said, but we prefer founders with experience. Each rejection left bruises, but I converted them into fuel. I kept refining, testing, and proving until the results spoke louder than prejudice. The breakthrough arrived in year 4. Our algorithm flagged anomalies in patient data from a regional clinic trial, subtle biomarkers of early pancreatic cancer that physicians had missed. The discovery stunned the medical board and caught the attention of national health organizations. Suddenly, calls that had once been curt returned with urgency. Investors wanted meetings, journalists wanted interviews, and clinics wanted partnerships. Growth surged from 3 employees to over 200. I went from writing code on secondhand laptops to managing a multi-million-dollar operation spanning continents. 10 years after I first touched a clunky diagnostic script, Metaskin AI was acquired by a global healthcare conglomerate for $2 billion. The announcement felt surreal. An ordinary girl from Portland, once the afterthought in her family, now the architect of technology valued in billions. Cameras flashed, headlines praised, and industry panels introduced me as a pioneer. Yet what mattered most to me was not the number attached to the acquisition. It was the opportunity the number unlocked. I envisioned a foundation that would shield others from the kind of exploitation I had endured. Too many women I met in business circles whispered similar stories. Paychecks controlled by fathers, boyfriends siphoning credit, spouses dictating every expense. I wanted to establish a trust that provided financial literacy, legal support, and emergency funds for those trapped in abusive dependency. The fortune was not just mine to enjoy. It was mine to redirect toward liberation. When I shared the idea with my parents, expecting even a flicker of pride, I received something else entirely. My father leaned back in his chair, his tone edged with condescension. $2 billion, Sophia. Do you remember who fed you before you could even tie your shoes? You wouldn't be here without us. My mother chimed in with her well-worn line, the one etched into my bones since childhood. A girl doesn't need much. Family should come first. You should be grateful enough to give it back. In that moment, a chill ran through me, sharper than any ocean wind could ever be. Instead of celebrating the culmination of years of sacrifice, they reduced it to a debt owed to them. Gratitude had become a weapon, twisted into a demand. Their words were not an embrace, they were a ledger, tallying my success as if it had always been theirs to claim. I smiled politely, hiding the sting. Outwardly, I nodded and thanked them for their support. Inwardly, I marked it as a warning flare. The distance between my intention to empower others and their desire to possess me had never been clearer. The seeds of betrayal were already germinating in that exchange, disguised as parental advice. I knew then that the ocean I would one day be pushed into had been gathering for years. After the acquisition glow faded, the pattern at home showed through like a watermark. Daniel cycled through losses, a smoothie truck repossessed, a crypto rig that scorched his wiring, a boutique gym rich in mirrors and poor in members. Each collapse arrived with invoices and a sermon about momentum. I had once patched the holes because emergencies felt finite. Now the requests sounded like policy. Sophia will cover payroll, Sophia will fix timing, Sophia will make it disappear. When I proposed a budget, Daniel smirked. Budgets are for people planning to stay small. My parents nodded as if he'd coined a law. They remained devout to a theology in which he was one miracle away, if only the world would stop saying no. I had been the household's yes. The formal pitch landed on a Sunday I had paid for. Groceries, wine, dessert. My father set a folder on the table calmly. We've been thinking about fairness, family fairness. My mother laced her fingers and smiled with practiced softness. Split everything. Half for you, half for the family fund Daniel will manage. I will take care of you when you're older, I said. I won't have my work to bankroll more experiments. Daniel's chair scraped. Experiments? You mean my career? My father tapped the folder. Family equity keeps families whole. Sign, and we avoid resentment. No, I said. We can discuss a stipend for healthcare and housing. My mother's eyes filled, the weather I'd forecast since childhood. After all we've done, you won't even share? A girl doesn't need much. I cleared the plates, hands steady by practice. The week that followed turned detail into evidence. On their kitchen iPad, the browser cued its confession. Intestacy rules Oregon. Non-spousal heirs, revocable trust, payable on death accounts, and, stranger still, accidental death at sea jurisdiction. A legal pad listed numbers for a notary, an insurance broker, an estate planner. Daniel, casual as sunlight, asked if my will named a successor trustee who understood the family's values. Somebody was studying outcomes where I was absent. I created space without declaring war. Amanda reviewed my estate plan. We added bright lines to proxies and corporate shields with automatic notices if anyone attempted changes. Ethan audited my devices, tightened two-factor, moved backups off-site, and set tripwires for strange logins. I opened a safe deposit box and moved originals there. Nothing dramatic, just locks clicking. The pressure campaign adjusted. Daniel texted emergencies past midnight. Payroll hits Friday. If I miss it, people starve. My mother left voicemails that began as prayers and curdled into guilt. My father lectured about legacy, reciting dynasties as if history could shame me into compliance. When I canceled an extra card Daniel had been using, he arrived waving receipts. You're ruining my credit. I'm correcting mine, I answered. Another dinner, another folder. Glossy pages bore a logo for a foundation with my name. Public good, my father said. You sign here. The board, us, allocates grants. I read the fine print, sweeping powers of attorney dressed as convenience, clauses allowing temporary asset reallocation by majority vote. I slid it back. No. His jaw set. Don't be dramatic. I'm being precise. Later, I noticed a charter brochure on the counter, a sleek yacht, an itinerary embossed in gold. Family celebration cruise. Paper clipped to it were liability waivers and a packing list in my mother's curling hand. She hummed while folding napkins. We should mark this new chapter properly, she said. Just us. Just family. Suspicion is less thunderclap than barometer. Pressure drops. You feel the storm before lightning. I didn't accuse. I documented. I met quietly with our bank. Audited beneficiaries and removed pathways habit had left open. I told no one that sleep had gone shallow, that dreams ended with water sealing over my head. When I called Amanda to say I felt unsafe, she didn't ask for proof. You've given me enough, she said, and connected me with a private investigator for a soft sweep around my parents and Daniel. By the time the invitations arrived, engraved, faintly scented with salt and lemon, the decision was made. I would go, I would smile. And I would make sure the only thing easy to push overboard that week was their illusion of control. I accepted the cruise invitation and pretended relief, but suspicion sharpened everything I touched. It began with a small trespass. Daniel lingered in my kitchen while I stepped away to take a call, his hand drifting toward my laptop like a moth to a porch light. When I returned, the login screen glowed, although I had left the machine on my desktop, the cursor blinking like a pulse. He flashed a casual smile and said, "Thought I'd cue a playlist for the trip." I closed the lid with a politeness I didn't feel and set the computer in a drawer. The next morning, my mother asked whether my bank portal still used the simple password from college. "You've always been forgetful with numbers, honey. Maybe write it down for me in case of an emergency." I pictured the kitchen drawer where she filed loyalty cards and other people's details under the generous label of family. "I use a manager now," I said lightly. "Two-factor, too." She sighed and said, "So dramatic for family." I have never trusted drama, but I have always trusted logs. Ethan tuned my accounts to record every attempt, like a stenographer. That night, 3 failed logins hit my cloud storage from my parents' network, wedged between a florist purchase and a subscription to a sailing newsletter. Patterns are a kind of handwriting. I clipped the entries, forwarded them to Amanda, and sat with the cold prickle along my neck until reason steadied it. If they were testing fences, I would raise the height and pour new footings. Preparation had to be thorough without turning me clumsy. I rented a storage unit through an LLC and moved physical records there. I created decoy folders called tax scans and filled them with harmless summaries, while originals lived on encrypted drives. I swapped my router for a model that surfaced unknown devices like flares on dark water. Within the week, it chimed, "Daniel iPhone joined." I watched the icon appear and vanish the way a fin skims and sinks, leaving only ripples and a guess. Precautions give you a place to stand when the ground under family shifts. I hired a licensed private investigator named Frank Lowe, a man who dressed like the background and spoke in clean, short sentences. We chose a cover story, routine security hardening after the acquisition, and scheduled a discreet sweep of my parents' house during their errands. Frank found they'd obvious. A printout of my public filings with sticky flags, and a magazine profile with a headline circled in red. He also found a legal pad littered with terms they had not used before: payable on death, successor trustee, accidental death at sea. I added my own measures. A pinhole camera disguised as an essential oil diffuser watched the dining room, the table where decisions always happened. A second unit hid inside a bookshelf speaker in the den. Both recorded locally and mirrored to an off-site drive. I told myself they were there to settle arguments with facts, the way code ends speculation by compiling. Evidence is not suspicion's cousin. Evidence is suspicion's grown spine. 3 nights later, my mother invited Daniel for stew and strategy. The diffuser saw everything. They spread papers like a map to a future I had not approved. Daniel drew arrows between accounts, guessing at roots he did not understand. My mother corrected him with the patience of a bookkeeper. "No, sweetheart, funds move after paperwork clears." Then she lowered her voice, and the microphone leaned toward every syllable. "After she's gone, everything will belong to Daniel." The sentence did not roar. It landed like black ice, silent, treacherous, undeniable. My breath shortened, then evened by force. I rewound twice to make sure I hadn't poured malice into ambiguity. There was no ambiguity. The date stamp blinked at the bottom of the frame, a witness that never blinked back. I saved the clip in 3 places, labeled it plainly, and backed it to a cold device that would never touch the internet. In the morning, my mother left me a voicemail about sunscreen. "The sun is wicked this time of year," she said, cheerful. "Bring the big hat." I stood at my sink and considered how some dangers arrive with sirens while others come as invitations printed on heavy paper. I RSVP'd yes and purchased contingencies: a satellite beacon, a waterproof pouch, and an exit plan that fit under a shirt. Suspicion had matured into proof, and proof demanded the one discipline I had practiced since childhood: prepare and do not look away. The yacht looked dressed for applause: polished teak, chrome catching the last shard of sun, linen napkins folded into crowns. My family called it a victory cruise. I arrived with an overnight bag and a controlled smile. The captain shook my hand. The crew passed with trays. My mother kissed my cheek as if approval could erase history. Daniel punched my shoulder. "To the genius," he said. My father raised a bottle toward the horizon and told the captain, cheerful, to set a generous course. I had already built my insurance. A waterproof pouch lay flat beneath my dress, the strap crossing my ribs like a whispered line. Inside sat a compact satellite beacon, a thin roll of emergency cash, and a laminated card with numbers I had never written anywhere else. The device felt like a belt you forget. Until metal bites. I adjusted it once and let my hand fall when my mother's eyes flicked down. She smiled. I smiled back. We slid from the marina at sunset. Shore lights thinned into a smear. Water turned ink. Music threaded the air. Night air pinched my bare arms. A tray of cocktails arrived like choreography. I took a bright one, lifted it, and let a measured spill slide down the glass as the yacht rocked. "Stronger than I expected," I said lightly. Daniel was already on his second. My father studied me the way a golfer studies wind before a swing. Dinner came in tidy courses. The captain briefed us. Open water after dark, smooth conditions, crew available. My father thanked him and suggested the team turn in early once dessert arrived. "We can manage," he said. My mother squeezed his wrist. Daniel poured another round and lifted his glass. "To tomorrow being simpler than yesterday." Theater asks for timing, so I obliged. I told a breezy story about a bumbling investor, let a sloppy laugh escape, and softened my vowels. The second drink warmed my hand, while most of it met the thirsty teak through the shadow of my arm. I might be a little tipsy, I confessed, letting my gaze go glossy. My mother's smile turned maternal. "You work too hard. Let the ocean hold you." By the time the crew retired, the yacht had become a private balcony nailed to the night. The rail shone like a silver line. I walked the perimeter with my glass, pausing at the bow to watch foam peel into ribbons. Daniel trailed just far enough to pretend disinterest. My parents drifted toward me from the other side, their orbit tightening with every slow step. Voices traveled with the wind. "Her accounts?" Daniel asked, bored around the edges. "The foundation paperwork?" My mother answered. "All drafted. After signatures, we consolidate. No confusion." My father chuckled. Prosperity should be frictionless. The word slid over the water with a hollow ring. I set my glass on the rail and watched it tremble. A tiny rehearsal. My father joined me at the shoulder, his hand settled there with ceremonial care. "You did well," he murmured, warmth shaped like a blade. "Rest now." My mother's palm pressed the center of my back, fingers spreading like an oath. Daniel stopped by the forward cleat, the smile he had kept folded finally unfolding. The engine hummed. "Say hello to the sharks," my father breathed. I understood the interval between words and consequence. My fingers slid along the rail as if I needed balance, not rescue. The push came in a single practiced beat, his shoulder, her shove, cleaner than I had imagined, as if they had rehearsed against pillows in a room where I was an idea, not a daughter. The deck tilted, sky dropped where the ocean rose. Gravity made its simple argument. I went over. Impact exploded across my back, the Pacific like a closing fist. Sound lost its borders. Everything became pressure and cold. Instinct seized the wheel kick, surface, breathe. I broke through into air raw as iron, coughing salt and shock. The yacht slid forward, wake unspooling silver. 3 silhouettes hovered for a heartbeat that felt like a verdict. Daniel's mouth curled. Then they were smaller. Then the night took them. Training clicked in, the way code follows a path. Once compiled. Float enough to breathe, then work. I rolled to my back to keep lungs high, one hand finding the pouch strap, thumb locating the beacon's ridged button. A muted light pulsed against my ribs. Alive, broadcasting. The seal held, the card and cash pressed harmlessly to skin. I counted breaths by pairs because numbers steady waters lies. Cold speaks in commands that contradict. Hurry, stop. I bargained with my muscles in minutes, not heroics. The wake spread like a road I would not take. Behind it, blackness walled the horizon. I tucked my chin toward heat I didn't have and listened for anything mechanical, anything human. There was only ocean and my own breath knitting seconds together. I let that truth sit beside the others. My parents were writing a future without me. Daniel wanted the clean ledger line my absence purchased. The yacht was a moving signature on documents already drafted. I had brought a pen of my own. From here on, every breath would be a line through their plan, a notation in a margin they had not considered. The beacon pulsed again, quiet as a heartbeat. I faced the sky and stayed. The ocean tried to bargain with me. Cold for breath, waves for memory. I floated on my back to keep my mouth above the chop and watched the yacht's stern lights shrink to 2 tired stars, then to nothing. The engine hum became a rumor, then absence. Night pressed close. I let the beacon under my shirt pulse at steady intervals and measured time by its quiet heartbeat. Between flashes, I talked to my body like a coach at the edge of a race. Breathe in. Hold. Kick easy. Count to 20. Start again. I learned water before I learned certainty. At the public pool on 12th Avenue, I practiced flip turns while thunder rattled the skylights. A lifeguard taught me to read small currents at the river, the swirls that look like lace and pull. Panic, he warned, is as dangerous as depth. That lesson returned now, a lane line in the dark. I could not fight the Pacific. I could negotiate with it. I kept my chin up and let the swells lift and lower me like a slow breath. Cold gnawed at the edges, fingers, then calves, then thoughts trying to curl inward for heat. I named constellations to keep language moving: Arcturus, Vega, Deneb. When a cloud erased them, I traded stars for numbers, multiplying 3s until the rhythm warmed me with order. I adjusted my clothes to trap a thin layer of water against skin and kept movement small, a stubborn metronome. The pouch strap cut a diagonal beneath my ribs, a reminder that planning still existed. Salt burned my lips. Every few minutes I rolled to breaststroke, to scan the horizon, then back to float, conserving what I had left. I remembered chlorine stitched into my hair after long sets and the vow I made at 16 after missing state by a quarter second. Never fold in the last lap. The ocean is all last lap. When fear rose wearing my parents' voices tidy, I let them talk and answered with motion. Kick, glide, kick. Far off, a gull called, sharp and confused. The sky softened at the rim, not dawn, only thinner cloud. I pressed my thumb against the beacon for a longer burst and imagined radio waves unspooling into the dark, minutes stretched like rope. I refused to drop it. Then a glow appeared, small as a match, drifting where horizon should be. It separated into 2 dull lamps and a pale wash along a hull. Hope punched air into me. I raised an arm and slapped water, counting 10 strokes, resting 5, repeating the set I had trained into pattern. I cupped the beacon through my shirt to shield its blink and aimed it toward the shape. The boat altered course by degrees, not drama. Voices arrived as fragments, Spanish like music. An engine throttled back. The glow widened. A rope ladder slapped the water beside me. Hands reached from shadow. I hooked my elbows and hauled myself rung by rung, legs shaking the way they do after a long race. On deck, wood under my palms felt impossible. Someone wrapped a coarse blanket around my shoulders. Someone else lifted a bottle to my lips and warned, "Despacio!" The older man introduced himself as Luis. The younger, his son I guessed, was Marco. They studied my face as if choosing a road. "¿Qué pasó? What happened?" I licked salt from the corner of my mouth. "Accident," I said, voice raw. "Fell from a yacht." "Truth." Edited. Luis frowned, not unkind. "Where's the yacht?" I shook my head. "Far?" He traded a look with Marco that said the sea had given them other stories. They didn't push. They moved with ritual. Dry towel, warm tea, ointment where rope had rubbed skin. Being saved is an intimacy. Their hands worked without curiosity, only purpose. Warmth returned as pins and needles. Luis asked for a name. I gave him only, Sophie, a syllable that meant enough. He nodded like a man who'd seen fugitives. "We go to Ensenada," he said. "Police, doctor." My hand tightened around the blanket. "Please, no police yet. It was an accident." He weighed that and shrugged. A bargain between strangers. "Descansa," he said. Rest. Outside, waves hammered rhythm, patient, indifferent, and ancient tonight. As the boat shouldered the waves, I lay against the cabin wall and let motion cradle me. The beacon, back in its pouch, clicked against the laminated card. I had lived. That was the first fact. The second followed like a tide change. I could not go home as Sophia Grant, not yet. If the ocean had granted me time, I would spend it wisely. I closed my eyes and began to sort the steps between survival and justice, counting. Backward from the moment I would make them see me again. By the time Luis eased the boat into a small marina south of Ensenada, the story had chosen its headline, without me. Billionaire tech visionary lost at sea scrolled across a muted television while footage of a cutter shouldered white water. I sat in a corner in a borrowed hoodie, letting the screen tell strangers who I was no longer. Luis accepted a modest payment, squeezed my shoulder, and asked my name. "Sophie," I said. True enough for now. I took a bus to a fishing village where street dogs knew every vendor and the church bell kept kinder time. I rented a room above a bakery under a disposable name, Sophie Lane, and learned the place by sound. The mixer before dawn, oil in pans, a radio braiding rancheras with static. The window faced the bay far enough away that the water looked like rumor, not sentence. The beacon and pouch went in a drawer. I slept with shoes beside the bed. The world accepted my death with brisk efficiency. My parents stood behind microphones, faces arranged for grief. My mother dabbed at tears that did not smudge. My father spoke about the fragility of life and thanked authorities for their tireless search. Daniel, solemn in a Navy suit, promised to steward my legacy responsibly. When a reporter asked about finances, the feed cut to rescue boats and a photograph of me at a ribbon cutting, smiling into a future I had not met yet. Headlines multiplied: billionaire heiress lost off Baja, community mourns tech pioneer. Obituaries arrived with flattering inaccuracies. They praised a loving family and misquoted my mission. Condolences stacked while probate machinery began to hum. I watched from a plastic chair in an internet cafe with a rattling fan and a clerk selling scratch-offs. Each sentence declaring me gone granted cover, and I used the cover to build structure. First, I built a shell. I bought a prepaid phone and kept it dark. I dyed my hair 2 shades darker and cut blunt bangs that changed my face. I wore sunglasses until the mirror learned the new arrangement. In a border town, I rented a safe deposit box and slid in a cold drive labeled with a date. I slept lightly, as prey does, but I slept. Then I reached for the few people who never asked me to be small. I wrote 3 letters by hand and sent encrypted copies through accounts Ethan had prepared. To Amanda, my lawyer. I requested a sealed memo to the district attorney and a standing order to freeze assets if anyone touched my accounts. To Ethan, I asked for a hardened channel, new keys, and a dead man switch. To Frank, I asked for quiet eyes on my parents and Daniel, meetings, calls, attorneys, brokers. Within days, Amanda confirmed the petitions I expected: an emergency application to appoint my father as personal representative, a motion to obtain digital access for memorial purposes, and a request to expedite charitable commitments said to align with my wishes. Ethan flagged credential stuffing attempts against dormant emails and a phishing lure titled "Preserve Her Memory." Frank sent stills of Daniel meeting a broker at a steakhouse, dates and times stacked against a calendar that suddenly made sense. I kept my hands still and my mind moving. I sketched timelines on bakery invoices, naming each day after what it delivered: oxygen, proof, pressure, leverage. I stretched pesos the way I had stretched paychecks at 19, except now scarcity was tactical. At dusk, I walked the road above the harbor and practiced the posture of someone nobody notices. At night, I replayed the shove, the weight of 2 hands, until the memory cooled from flame to tool. Rena, the baker, asked why I always bought 2 coffees and drank only 1. I told her the second was for a friend who worked nights. She tucked a sugared concha into my bag, para la suerte, and I accepted both kindness and calories. My life, briefly, was this: a room that smelled like yeast, a map of filings, 3 trusted names, and the discipline to remain dead while I gathered what the living would need. Justice requires patience and proof. I had survived the water. Now I would master the waiting. I stayed patient. Amanda called from a blocked number while the bakery mixers hammered beneath my room. She did not soften anything. My parents had filed articles for the Sophia Grant Foundation, a charitable trust with a 3-person board, my father as chair, my mother as treasurer, and Daniel as executive director. The bylaws hid scalpels in lace, management fees commensurate with expertise, donor-advised subaccounts reassigned by simple majority, emergency reallocations without notice. I took notes on a paper bag while she summarized the filings. A draft press release announced a memorial gala, scholarships in my name, and a hospital wing bearing my initials, the dead daughter as brand. "We can challenge the filings," Amanda said, "but intention matters. If we show premeditated self-dealing, the Attorney General will move faster, build me the spine." Ethan joined on an encrypted line. He had lawfully recovered a cloud archive Daniel did not realize still synced to a secondary account. My father wrote timelines with bullet points and due dates. My mother forwarded condolence templates and pledge letters to seed early coverage. Daniel attached spreadsheets titled Routing Options, listing correspondent banks and currency spreads. One thread linked to a document labeled Jurisdiction Notes, Accidental Death at Sea. Frank stayed with shoe leather. He sent a manila packet to a drop box near the bus station. Inside were arbitration awards, state complaints, and a clipped column from a county paper. Years ago, my father had managed a real estate partnership that collapsed within inches of a creditor sweep. His older sister, my aunt, had invested her savings. When the walls came in, he withheld help and skipped a hearing, citing family strain. She declared, bankruptcy alone. The pattern was not an accident. It was a method. Build structures, move risk, leave the closest person holding the bill. I spread Frank's papers beside Ethan's timelines and Amanda's forms until they overlapped like panes of glass. It was theater. They did not just want my money, they wanted my image to sanctify its movement. The foundation would be their stage, and my name, the marquee. A portrait of me would hang above a podium where Daniel handed out grants to shells he controlled. The mini twist was brutal. They would launder the funds and polish themselves at the same time. So we built a counterproduction. Amanda drafted notices to the State Attorney General's Charities Division and the IRS Exempt Organizations Unit, flagging conflicts, self-dealing, and private inurement. She prepared ex parte motions to freeze specific accounts if activity matched the routing maps, plus a protective order to seal my location upon return. "If we move first," she said, "the law will already be looking at the right doors." Ethan designed redundancy and bait. He mirrored the email archive to 3 jurisdictions and lodged cryptographic proofs with independent timestamp services. He planted honey tokens, fake routing numbers, and harmless PDFs that would alert us if Daniel prowled the wrong directories. He braided a master chronology, the yacht charter deposit, the liability waivers, the estate planner appointment scheduled for the morning after my memorial, and draft speeches with metadata dated before my fall. Frank mapped bodies and rooms. He logged plates at the estate lawyer's office, noted a lunch with a donor-advised fund salesman who said impact like a password, and tailed a pallet marked medical supplies to a warehouse used by a freight forwarder with a Caribbean address. It fit. At night, I rehearsed my entrance the way I had rehearsed survival in the water. Slow, precise, unshowy. Dinner for 4 at my house. A table set with restraint, a box with 4 compartments, video, emails, financials, warrants. I would stand inside their narrative and let the documents read themselves out loud, not vengeance. Audit. I needed a symbol I could hold when the hours went thin. A street vendor sold tiny silver anchors. I bought one. Back in my room, I wrote a letter to the woman I planned to be a year from now. You kept your voice. You used the law. You did not let grief rename you. I sealed it and placed it in the safe deposit box beside an encrypted drive labeled with a date and 2 initials only Amanda and I understood. When the invitation posted for the Sophia Grant Foundation launch, I circled the date in red. The venue was my home. The headliners were my parents. Daniel would announce the first grant to an entity born yesterday. I booked travel under a name that matched my passport's new face and chose a dress that could hide a beacon and a phone the size of a deck of cards. I pressed the anchor into my palm, tucked it away, and promised the room I would come back as myself, not their portrait. Justice would be patient, precise, and delivered in my own voice tonight. I began with my body because it was the one instrument I could tune without anyone's permission. Each dawn, I ran the coastal road until the air felt clean inside my lungs and the baker's radio faded to a metronome. Planks, breath ladders, resistance bands looped under a doorframe. I rebuilt stamina the ocean had taxed. Strength was information. It steadied my hands for the kind of work that leaves no fingerprints. The mirror became a partner. I dyed my hair 2 shades darker, then cut blunt bangs that changed my geometry. Tortoiseshell frames softened angles. With a neutral coat and a cap low, I looked like a teacher on errands, not a headline ghost. I practiced mannerisms that made me invisible. Shorter strides, a slower nod, a habit of scanning shelves instead of faces. Amanda and Ethan coordinated the legal and digital scaffolding while Frank logged movements I would need to quote later. I built my own lattice of proof. 3 rugged drives, A, B, and C, held mirrored archives, video from the diffuser camera, the dining room mic, the email threads detailing routes and fees, the yacht charter contract, and the estate planner's minutes. A lived with Amanda in a sealed envelope, B sat in a safe deposit box 2 towns away, and C traveled on my person beneath a stitched pocket. I mailed a 4th set, D, to a federal office with a cover letter steadier than I felt, to be opened by the assigned agent if harm comes to me before my statement is given. The packet included chain of custody notes and cryptographic hashes Ethan notarized with independent timestamps. None of it was theatrical. The point of evidence is that it survives bad weather and worse intentions. At night, when the village quieted and the ocean's breath returned to hearing, I wrote to myself on cheap stationery that absorbed ink like thirsty ground. If you survive, turn pain into justice. I dated each page and numbered it like a ledger that would reconcile one day. The letters were not pep talks. They were instructions for a future that deserved clarity, a life that would not be built on wreckage without naming it first. I sealed them and placed copies with the drives. If I vanished, the map to justice would not. I rehearsed the return the way a diver rehearses entries. Angles, timing, splash control, dinner for 4, wine already poured, a room arranged to feel inevitable. I mapped sightlines from the foyer to the table, from the table to the gift box, from the box to the door where officers would wait for my signal. I set a private deadline. The night they gathered to launch my foundation would also be the night I reclaimed my name. If theater had been their tool, transparency would be mine. The disguise needed muscle memory, not just props. I practiced clearing domestic thresholds like a contractor, keys on a lanyard, clipboard under an arm, a neutral greeting in Spanish and English. I learned the routes without cameras, the service entrance code my father never changed, the rhythm of the motion lights along the east walkway. Frank sent diagrams. Ethan fed me updates as petitions became calendar dates. Amanda pre-cleared a judge for emergency warrants and drafted a protective order to shield my location once I resurfaced. I bought a dress with structure, not drama, tailored to hold a phone the size of a deck of cards above my ribs, and the small anchor charm flat against my sternum. The necklace wasn't superstition. It was a private metronome. When nerves skittered, I pressed it and remembered the pool on 12th Avenue, the smell of chlorine, the sentence I had carried since 16. Do not fold in the last lap. On my last night in the village, I stood on the roof with a paper cup of coffee and listed contingencies. If they ran, doors would lock. If they raged, professionals would step forward. If they cried, documents would speak over them. Justice would be patient and audible. At the bakery, Reina hugged me and slipped a still warm roll into my bag. "Para que vuelvas," she said, "for your return." I promised her I would. Travel under the new name felt less like deceit than like patience wearing a coat. A shuttle to the border, a quiet ride north, a room near the airport with a window that faced only concrete. I ironed the dress on a towel, laid the binder beside the drives, and checked the mirror once more. Not a ghost, not a portrait, a woman with a plan. They would raise a glass to their future that night. I would meet them at the door they believed belonged to them and hand them mine instead, a ledger balanced and full, signed in ink they could not wash away. They came home laughing. Tires hissed over the gravel, the garage door sighed, and the echo of celebration drifted through the foyer. I waited in the seam of the curtains, letting the house hold its breath. On the dining table, 4 place settings gleamed under candles, porcelain and crystal aligned on a linen runner. In the center sat a square box wrapped in bone-white paper, ribbon tied plain. My mother noticed the light first. "Did you leave these on?" she asked, voice bright and thin. My father stopped, listening, without moving. Daniel pushed the door wider, half a grin still pinned to his face from whatever toast crowned their evening, until he clocked the 4th chair and the 4 glasses of wine. I stepped from the shadow and let the room see me. I had dyed my hair back to its natural brown. The change landed like a photograph developing. For a breath, they froze. My mother's hand rose to her throat. My father's jaw set, loosened, recalculated. Daniel blinked as if clearing smoke, eyes already hunting exits. "Welcome home," I said. "I've got a surprise for you." Silence arrived like a 4th guest. A clock ticked. The furnace clicked. I pulled out the head chair and stayed standing. My father recovered first, smoothing his voice for sympathy. "Sophia?" he murmured, gentle as bait. "Thank God. We thought—" "You thought wrong," I said. "Please, sit. It's a simple meal, bread, wine." Truth. Daniel gave a single brittle laugh. "A prank?" His gaze flicked toward the hall, measuring distance. "If you run," I said, "you'll only spill the wine." My mother stepped forward, hands open. "Sweetheart, you must be freezing. Where have you been? We were sick with worry." Her fingers hovered, then fell when she saw I wouldn't be touched. "You look tired," she added, and the pity in it felt like theft. "Chairs," I said. "Be comfortable." They circled the table like mourners pretending proximity is respect. My father took the seat opposite me, his old post. My mother settled to his right. Daniel kept standing until silence made him visible, then dropped into the last chair, eyes fixed on the box. "You staged a memorial," I said evenly. "You gave interviews. You scheduled a gala in my name." I folded my hands. Tonight felt appropriate. "We were honoring you," my father said. The smile on him was a costume that used to work. "This is a misunderstanding." "Maybe," I said. "But the table is set for 4, and that includes facts." I nodded at the box. "They've been patient." Daniel sniffed. "What's in it?" He tried for boredom and fell short. My mother touched the ribbon, testing texture. My father moved her hand away with a tenderness that used to unmake me. "Not tonight." "You died," he added gently. "People saw the search. The ocean is merciless." "It is," I said. "It also teaches." I sat then, not to rest, but to anchor the space. The little anchor at my collarbone warmed. "House rules," I said. "No shouting, no phones, no lies. Break them and the surprise happens on the lawn." Keep them and we finish like people who can hear punctuation. Threats, Daniel said. Boundaries, I answered. They're new here. My mother's eyes shone. We love you, Sophie. I let it pass. What you loved was access, I said, calm as water. I slid a small envelope across the runner to my father. A question. When you filed the foundation articles, did you like the font? Classic serif, very solemn. Color left him, returned as anger, drained again. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. You don't understand pressures, he began. I understand arithmetic, I said. And I understand staging. Grief photographs well with a donor wall behind it. I lifted my glass, level. Drink if you'd like. It isn't poisoned. Poison moves slow and pretends to be kindness. I don't. The furnace clicked again. Somewhere, a siren drifted past and kept going. We held the moment between us until it held itself. I placed my palm on the box, not yet untying the ribbon. Before we begin, I said, hear this from me alone. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to end the hurting. My mother exhaled, relief and dread braided. Then what do you want? Accuracy, I said. Sequence. Consequence. I leaned back. And then sleep. Daniel leaned forward, knuckles dimpling the cloth. Open it, he said. End the magic trick. Soon, I said. To understand the gift, you needed to see the table first. I looked at each of them in turn, the way a judge scans a gallery and recalls everyone is a citizen. I tore a heel from the loaf and passed the basket left. The ordinary motion steadied the room, made ceremony out of breathing. My mother unfolded her napkin with trembling fingers, smoothing the linen as if wrinkles could carry blame. My father reached toward his pocket, a reflex older than honesty, and stopped when he remembered the rule. His hand hovered, then withdrew. Daniel tapped a rhythm under the table he couldn't control. Officers? He asked lightly. Only if we forget how to listen, I said. Let's try something strange then. Silence. We tasted it together, the way you taste a medicine you hope will work. Welcome home, I said again, softer. Let's eat. Then we open the box tonight. My father reached for the ribbon and paused, as if etiquette could still edit outcomes. I nodded once. He pulled, and the bow sighed open. The lid lifted. Inside, truth sat in 4 precise layers, stacked like courses in a meal no one wanted but everyone deserved. Top layer, a slim media player labeled Dining Room, March 14, 8:37 p.m. He tapped the screen. My mother's voice filled the room, smaller and colder than I remembered. After she's gone, everything belongs to Daniel. The video from the diffuser camera showed hands moving across papers, arrows drawn between accounts, my father's pen underlining accidental death at sea. A second clip rolled. The deck at night, distorted but clear enough. Silhouettes, the rail, the shove, a girl falling. My father flinched. Deepfakes, he snapped, grasping for a railing that wasn't there. I slid a small envelope toward him, hash values, timestamps, an affidavit from a forensic lab. Chain of custody lives in that paper, I said. Truth has receipts. Second layer, a binder embossed with the name they borrowed, Sophia Grant Foundation, plus bylaws trimmed for theft. I had tabbed the pages for speed. Management fees, emergency reallocations, donor-advised sub-accounts, I read. Everything routed by majority vote. Your majority. My father's hands trembled, not from shame but from math colliding with law. My mother dabbed her eyes and began to weep loudly, a performance that used to move rooms. Tonight the room refused to travel. We wanted to honor you. Third layer, a drive and printed emails. Subject lines marched like orders. Routing. Options. Jurisdiction notes. Post-memorial timeline. My father wrote deadlines. Daniel added offshore banks and currency spreads. My mother forwarded condolence quotes with the formatting stripped. I tapped an email where Daniel had typed, "Once the PR quiets, we can start moving." His face burned. Everyone manages taxes, he said, brittle. You manage erasure, I replied. The difference is intent. Bottom layer. A folder, heavy with signatures, warrants, subpoenas, freezes, a judge's order sealed under a blue tab. For tonight, I said. They will wait until I call. I wanted you to see what you built. My father's breath shortened. He kept staring at the blue tab as if color could argue law. My mother tried to stand. The leg of her chair caught the rug and returned her to the table. Daniel's palms pressed flat, then curled into fists he could not use. This is ambush, he spat. This is due process. I picked up the remote and paused the media player on the frame where the yacht's rail cut the sky. That is the last second I gave you without conditions, I said evenly. Everything after belongs to the truth. The furnace clicked, the house breathing with us. No one reached for wine. My father broke first. We can talk, he said, voice chafed. Family handles family, no police. I shook my head. Family didn't handle me. My mother tried a softer key. Sweetheart, think about the headlines. You'll be devoured. I survived headlines, I said. I survived you. Daniel leaned back and stared at the ceiling, then looked straight at me. How did you live? He asked, not curious, only offended by the failure of physics. I swam, I said. And I planned? He cursed again, smaller this time. I closed the box and rested my hand on the lid. There is one more layer, I added. Consequences. The word settled like a table finally level. Outside, a car door thumped somewhere on the street, ordinary noise wearing new meaning. I took a breath and let it out in a measured line. When I was a kid, you taught me that a girl doesn't need much, I said. You were wrong. A girl needs safety. A woman needs the law. Tonight, both are in the driveway. My father's fingers rattled against the stemware. My mother's sob rose, theatrical and thin. Daniel muttered an obscenity, then another, like coins dropped. My father stared at the closed box as if it might blink. I let the silence hold him and then broke it with a ledger of our past. When rent was short, I paid it. When Daniel wrecked the borrowed car, I covered repairs. When you opened a card in my name, I cleared the debt and the calls. I wrote checks without speeches. That was love, even when it looked like paperwork. He lifted his head. You owe this family. Everything you have grew out of our sacrifices. No, I said. Everything I have grew out of nights you didn't see, shifts you never worked, and hours nobody applauded. Generosity isn't collateral. Daniel shoved his chair. It skated. I deserve to live better than you, he shouted. I've got vision. You just hoard. You had endless starts, I replied. What you call vision was a tab other people were forced to pay. I stopped paying. My mother's napkin shook in her lap. We were trying to keep the family whole. You tried to keep control, I said, by taking mine. I slid a photo onto the table. Me at 15 bussing tables, aprons stained with coffee. Another. The scholarship letter I opened in the laundry room because the kitchen was busy with Daniel's new cleats. This is the beginning of your math. Add to him. Subtract from me. My father leaned forward. Families make hard choices. You were always the practical one. It made sense. It made targets, I answered. And it trained me to spot theft disguised as duty. Daniel snorted. Call it whatever you want. That money belongs to us. You don't even have kids. Legacy isn't a siphon, I said. It's responsibility. Mine will not run through fraud. He jabbed a finger at the box. None of that proves intent. I tapped the paused frame of the deck, the 3 shadows by the rail. Intent pushed. His face hardened. Should have held you down. My mother flinched. My father shot him a warning look that arrived 3 months late. I kept my voice level. We can end this 2 ways, with you clinging to lies until strangers read them back to you in court, or with honesty now. I turned to my mother. This part is yours. Her eyes searched mine, then the candle, then my father's hands. I set a single sheet before her, a drafted statement acknowledging the planning, the filings, and the routing, with a note from the prosecutor about cooperation affecting charges. Tell the truth, on record. You will still be accountable, but you will not be the last one left holding what the men dropped. For a moment, something unarmored crossed her face. Fear or grief that finally found its name. She closed her eyes, breathed, opened them again. The room leaned in. Even Daniel stopped tapping. My father whispered, "Don't you dare." I didn't look away. This is the only mercy I can offer. It doesn't erase what happened on that deck, but it refuses to repeat the house we grew up in, where the woman pays the full price for the men's bravado. My mother picked up the pen. It hovered above the line, trembled, lowered, and then paused. She set it down. Her mouth formed an apology I had seen when she forgot a recital. She folded her hands. "So be it," I said softly. "The law will proceed without your help." Daniel laughed. "There, drama over." "No," I said. "Drama ends when the truth can walk without a bodyguard." I raised my phone, cued to the signal. "We're done talking." Thumbed the icon on my phone. A small pulse sent through the house like a bell only professionals hear. The candles hissed. Air changed temperature. From the foyer came the quick choreography of trained feet, and then voices. Calm, declarative, undeniable. "FBI, police, we have warrants." The syllables settled over the tablecloth, the way snow hushes a street. Not violent, just final. My father rose so fast his chair toppled. For a heartbeat, he looked almost relieved. If the law existed, then maybe we were only actors in a scene that could still be rewritten. Then the relief curdled. He pivoted toward the kitchen like a man remembering an old habit, yanked a drawer, and pulled a chef's knife long enough to measure a lifetime. The steel caught candlelight, a bright, stupid flare. "Don't," I said. My voice was level, the same register I'd used with venture boards and servers that wouldn't boot. 2 agents flowed through the doorway, hands open, posture lowered. "Sir, drop the knife." He didn't. He lunged, not elegant, not even fast, just propelled by a story that had finally run out of lines. The closest agent stepped in, trapped the wrist with a practiced torque, and translated momentum into the floor. The blade clattered, skittered, stopped. Another agent kicked it away. The click of cuffs sounded like punctuation. Daniel folded in on himself. Tears arrived with a speed that would have impressed a casting director. Wait, this isn't what you think," he babbled. "PR got ahead of us. We were going to make it right. I didn't push. He searched the air for a smaller guilt. An officer read charges without heat. When the cuffs touched his wrists, Daniel's bravado evaporated into begging. "Sophia, please. I'm your brother. We can fix this. I'll resign. I'll apologize. I'll say it was all Dad." He leaned toward me, eyes red and bright. "Just tell them." I didn't. I reminded myself that mercy is worthless if it requires amnesia. The agent guided him upright. The metal whispered again. My mother stood last. She had not moved when the drawer opened, had not screamed when the knife flashed. Now her knees loosened, and she sat back down as if the chair had tugged her. She looked past the agents, past the box, past me, to something only she could see. "You're still my daughter," she murmured, voice web-thin. "Whatever happens, you're still my daughter." It was the only sentence in the room with no angle. I said nothing. Silence was the truth I could live with. The dining room kept its ordinary promises. The soft tick of the thermostat, wax cooling at the lip of a candle, a draft sneaking under the door. An agent photographed the box. Another logged the binders. Tents went up beside exhibits like small white roofs. I handed over drives and hashes the way a diver hands up air tanks. Carefully, gratefully, already lighter. As they led my father through the foyer, he twisted for one last statement. "This is betrayal," he spat. I met his eyes and let the sentence fall between us like a dull coin. "No," I said. "This is consequence." Outside, radios crackled, tires rolled. The door shut with domestic softness, the same sound it had made every night of my childhood. Only meaning had changed. The courtroom was colder than I expected, all glass and restraint. I sat behind the rail with Amanda while the prosecutor laid out the timeline. The yacht, the filings, the routing plans, and the video that never blinked. My father stared straight ahead as the judge read the sentence, 35 years. Daniel swallowed, blinked fast, and got 25. My mother wept without sound and received 18. No one cheered. Justice is plain spoken. It does not applaud itself. Outside, cameras clustered. A crawl named the case, the $2 billion betrayal. I kept walking. In the weeks that followed, life became signatures, verifications, and new keys. I restored what they had tried to rearrange, accounts, titles, and the small facts that make a person official. I met with the state's charities division so the foundation bearing my name would be dissolved, not diverted. I closed the accounts that had been opened like trapdoors. Then I built the thing I had promised myself in the dark water, the Phoenix Trust. We provide emergency stipends, legal counsel, and financial literacy to people strangled by economic control. Survivors arrive with folders and stories that make the air heavy. We give them breathing room, a plan, a phone number that answers. Recovery was not a montage. Some mornings I woke to the ocean in my chest and had to count myself back to the present. I worked with a therapist who reminded me that vigilance is useful until it isn't, and that boundaries can be doors, not walls. I learned to cook for one without setting 4 plates. I learned to sit on my own porch at dusk and let quiet mean safety, not pause. I did not forgive, and I did not cultivate hate. I chose something steadier, responsibility for what comes next. A year to the day after the arrest, I chartered a small boat with a good engine and no chandeliers. I wore a sweater, practical shoes, and the anchor charm against my skin. Jane stood beside me, saying little, which is a form of love. The captain cut the motor where the chart showed deep water. The sea breathed, old, indifferent. I held 12 white roses, one for each month I kept breathing despite everything, and let them go one by one. They drifted apart, then found one another again, a loose constellation traveling without hurry. I watched until the current kept their secrets. I faced the wind and said aloud what had become the spine of my days. Justice is not the same as healing, but healing begins when justice is served. Then I turned to you, because this story belongs to anyone who has been told to be smaller. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell us in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Not just to hear more, but to join a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending this time with us. Wherever you are, carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart.